I am really pumped up after that speech. Yes.
I'm guessing Scott Petrak is too. He covers the Browns for the Chronicle Telegram. He writes all of his work is available at brownzone.com. Bye week's over, Scott. Here we go.
Woo!
I know. I'm heading out to practice right now.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, man.
He's pumped. Well, he didn't say that, but he's pumped. I'm going to go ahead and say it for you.
I miss practice when they don't practice.
See? There you go. So riddle me this one, my friend.
Yeah.
Bye weeks, especially in the middle of the season, always seem to be a great time to take a look at your football team and maybe tweak some things, maybe adjust some things. If you're Kevin Stefanski, you got anything big that you want to adjust as you get done and you get ready to play the Jets coming up on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, you look at, could he change play calling? Could he give that to Tommy Rees? To me, that'd be the biggest adjustment he could make. I'm not convinced that would have a positive impact, but I think that's the biggest change. You look at personnel, and there's nobody to change on the offensive line. The running backs are fine. Dillon Sampson started to get more touches recently anyway. What do you do at receiver? And if Cedric Tillman comes back this week, as Kevin Stefanski thought he would when we talked to him last week, I mean, that's an addition to your receiver room, but I just don't know who else you can put in. Is Luke Flory the answer? Is Caden Davis the answer off the practice squad? More Malachi Corley? I mean, those are the kind of options that the Browns have, and I just don't know if any of those options is great as you're trying to find a way to jumpstart this passing game.
All right, what are we doing tomorrow? Are they making any moves by 3 o'clock? I'm hearing this story over the weekend. We're buyers, and I'm like, I'm not buying that for a minute. You tell me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would make sense for them to try to get a receiver in there. I mean, I just laid out the reasons the receiver core is not any good right now or is not very good. And I think if you're trying to evaluate these quarterbacks and figure out a way to win some games, adding a receiver would be a great idea. I don't know how feasible that is. What you would have to give up to get one. Would you take a guy? You'd want a guy that's signed beyond this year. So I wouldn't rule that out for the Browns because I do think that makes sense, short-term and long-term. But I would think they'd be more likely to trade a piece or two. I don't think we're going to see a blockbuster, but it wouldn't shock me if David Njoku or Shelby Harris and or Malik Collins, Wyatt Teller, like those kind of guys, older guys, most of those guys are in the last year of their contracts. I just think Andrew Berry will make a trade or two, but I wouldn't expect anything huge.
If anybody, in their estimation, is not going to be back here next year, Scott, with a record of 2-6, I have no hesitation about trading anybody who I don't think will be here next year. Do you?
Well, I get your point, Jeff, and I'm leaning toward agreeing with you. However, you are still trying to win some games. You're trying to evaluate this coaching staff. You're trying to evaluate these quarterbacks. So I just don't think you can give away guys that are key contributors. Like if you trade Wyatt Teller for a 6th-round draft pick, is that 6th-round pick really going to help? Whereas the guy that replaces him, we assume is a step down because he's not starting, and Dillon Gabriel isn't protected, or Shedeur Sanders is protected.
Now, see, I agree with you on that. To me, if you're going to trade a guy who's playing for you for a 6th, you're just wasting your time and you're not helping your team at all.
I agree, and I think that goes for most guys that I mentioned. Even David Njoku. David Njoku has a huge role in this team as a blocker in the run and the pass games. They would miss him if they traded him. So the value you get in return has to be worth worsening your team for the final 9 games. And I get that they're probably not going to the playoffs, but I do think you have to keep that in mind. So I don't think I'm trading one of those type of players for anything below, a 4th-round, 3rd-round pick. Like that would be my goal. I just don't value those 5th and 6th and 7th rounders. I'm sure I don't value them as much as Andrew Berry, and it would not be enough for me to just have some kind of quote-unquote fire sale.
You think there are players out there that they wish they could have drafted who they might be able to get for some of their excess picks in the 5th round and beyond next year?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, right? I mean, we always go back to that Amari Cooper trade where they got Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick. Now you got to be willing to pay a guy a lot of times, but the Haslams don't have an issue with that. I'm sure that that's the goal of adding those late, middle, and late round picks. But that doesn't always come to fruition, and you wind up with all these picks. And I get that there's value in them, right? You can package them to move up or down. You can use one to get a pick in the future round, right? If you trade one during the 26th draft for a 27 pick, like I get that there is value to them. I just don't think there's enough value to give away really prized players.
What's the goal for the rest of the season? I know it's a big, broad question, but what's the goal? I'm sitting here trying to figure this out with the quarterbacks. Fans want to see Shedeur Sanders. What is the goal?
Well, I'm having a hard time separating the wins and losses versus the bigger picture, because every Sunday and every Monday people are mad when the Browns lose and the offense doesn't score. So it can't all be about the future. If it is all about the future, then we have to stop talking about these games like they matter. Yeah. And I just don't think that's the way you approach an NFL season. And we're judging Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry on wins and losses. So do they not matter this year? I think that's a really key point. So I do think wins and losses matter. I think there's games on the schedule that the Browns should win, or at least have a really good chance to win, starting with Sunday against the Jets. Yep. And then they have the Titans, and they have the Raiders, right? 3 teams with records the same as theirs or worse than theirs. So there's a chance to win games even if you're not, going to the playoffs. And I do think that's important. And then it's about evaluating these young guys. And that starts with both quarterbacks who, unless they get on a run, I would expect we see Shedeur Sanders at some point, relatively soon, I would think. And then it's the rest of these young guys, and okay, can this guy step in? Is he really a foundational piece? Does Dillon Sampson have what it takes to be the number 2 that, when they drafted him, I think they wanted him to be, but I'm not sold on that yet. I think that's the second part of this evaluation period from the last 9 games.
Scott Petrak joining us from the Chronicle Telegram, brownzone.com, where you can find all of Scott's work, and that does a great job of covering the team. You just said unless they go on a run. Is that the only way Dillon Gabriel hangs on to this thing and keeps Shedeur off the field? Because I'll be honest, Scott, I think you do. I know I do. I think Andy does. I'd love to see Shedeur Sanders play. I want to see some answers. However, I'd rather see great quarterback play from the guy who's playing quarterback right now. How can Dillon keep Shedeur off the field, or can he not?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is if they went on a run. And, if he starts winning games, if they start winning games with him at quarterback, then it's awfully difficult to make that switch, especially if they remain in the playoff discussion, right? At least when it's possible, and nobody seems to be running away with the division. So I think that's the easiest way. Now, if Gabriel starts to play really well, which he hasn't done, and they still lose, then I guess there's an argument to be made, hey, he's a third-round pick. They have the 2 first-round picks next year. Everybody thinks, or at least I think, they're lined up to take a quarterback. Do you need to see more of Gabriel to get a fuller evaluation? And I understand that. And then the third factor would be the preparedness of Shedeur Sanders. And I don't mean like from he's not working hard enough standpoint. I mean, is he ready? Is he ready to go execute what the Browns need him to do? And if they don't think he is inside the building, then that's another reason you stick with Gabriel. But I think even then, the math changes at some point where it's just like you have to see what you have. Put him on the field. Maybe he's a gamer. Even if he's not, hasn't maybe shown what you want to see in practice, maybe it comes out in the game. And I think at some point the season is enough of a lost cause that there's no damage in putting in Shedeur Sanders.
Is that what's the trigger though that's going to make this thing everything you laid out? I totally agree with. I think the same thing. I don't know what the trigger is going to be. And if you go back to Kevin's press conference last week, he didn't sound like he was budging on what they're doing at quarterback.
He didn't, but they're also heading into the bye, and I think he just wanted to quiet that conversation. I think for being around Kevin now for going on 6 years, he wants to quiet that as early as he can, and then when he has to switch it, he'll switch it. He didn't talk about Joe Flacco getting benched, and then one day he left the door open, and then 2 days or the next day was the move, right? So I think that's just how he operates. I think the trigger, it makes, if the Browns keep losing and Dillon Gabriel continues to struggle, then to me it's like 3 more games. You start him for 3 more games. That would give him 7 starts, and then it would give Shedeur Sanders, assuming he stayed healthy, the final 6 games. It feels like an equitable split. You saw a pretty good chunk of Dillon Gabriel, not that 7 games is the end-all, but at least it's 7 games, almost half a season. Then you give Shedeur Sanders a pretty good run. And, when I talk about him not being ready, that's just because when the Browns drafted him, they thought he had a long way to go, right? The whole learning Mandarin from learning English. He didn't come from a complicated system. So I know that he's closed that gap, and I'm sure he's way closer to being ready, or maybe he's ready, and he says he is, right, to be the guy. I just haven't heard the Browns go out and say that, yes, we're ready to put him in. But when they make that switch, if they make that switch, I'm sure that would be their talking point, and they would feel he is ready to go operate their offense. So if things don't change, I don't think it goes longer than 3 or 4 more weeks with Dillon Gabriel.
Huh.
Scott, you think they take a quarterback next year with one of those first-round picks? I think they take one with one of those first-round picks. We'll see if they do. But I will say, this doesn't feel right to me. Does this feel right to you, or could you see adjusting? Dillon Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, somebody they take with a first-round pick, and Deshaun Watson going into the offseason program together?
That does not feel right to me.
It doesn't, does it?
No. And, Watson's the first thing that doesn't feel right. Like, I've always thought that this coming offseason would be when they parted ways and they decided to, take their medicine with the huge salary cap hit. But even both Gabriel and Sanders, I don't know if that's, especially if you draft a guy in the first round, I just don't know if that's the composition of your quarterback room. Yeah, it just doesn't feel right at first blush.
I agree. Could you see one of the 2 young guys here now, Dillon or Shedeur, being traded in the offseason?
Yeah, I don't know what kind of market there would be, but I could certainly see that. And we have to keep in mind that who knows who's going to be making these decisions, right? I mean, if it's Andrew Berry and it's a current regime, then we know that they like Dillon Gabriel more than Shedeur Sanders coming out. And that opinion could change at any time. It could change in the last part of the season if Sanders plays great, right? Maybe in their minds he moves up. Maybe Gabriel's fallen off enough in their minds. But we know that that's how they felt, at least, in April, and I think even until now, right? Because he's been ahead of Shedeur Sanders on the depth chart. So I would think that Sanders would be more likely to be traded given that history. But if it's a different coach and a different GM, they could have a completely different evaluation of Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. So I just think it's way too early to forecast that.
Scott Petrak's joining us from the Chronicle Telegram. So you get a division where you're 3 games back, Scott. Number-wise, okay, mathematically you still might be in it. We haven't seen anything out of this offense that makes us think that they're still in it. So if you're Kevin Stefanski, are you trying to win games? Are you trying to look at talent? Do you think they've received word from management ownership that they're good to go for next year? Or do you think that's still hanging out there? Because it might affect the way you do some things. I don't know.
Sure. Well, I think the coach is always trying to win. Now, you could still try to win and play younger guys, and that's an organizational decision. And we've seen that. I mean, they already got 14 rookies on the roster. They're already playing a bunch of young guys.
Yeah.
I don't know how much younger they could get. I mean, we could pick a couple spots. Do you really want to see Zach Zinter and sit down one of your high-paid guards? I mean, I don't know how much sense that makes, but that is out there, right? He's a young guy you haven't seen. So I don't know about that. But when it comes to, just because they're so young as it is, when it comes to the assurance, I don't think they've gotten that assurance. I know that the Haslams have said all along that they really like Berry and Stefanski, and they favor continuity, and they trust these guys, and they know they're smart. But I don't think they've been told, yes, you're coming back regardless. And I just think that's not the reality. Even if they had been told that, and they finished 2-15 after 3-14, and we already know how the fans are feeling about this season, that's a hard sell. So I think there's plenty of time for the Haslams to change their minds. And I don't think this decision will be made until we get much closer or till the end of the season.
Scott, thank you, buddy. Enjoy practice.
Thanks,
it's always fun. Scott Petrak joining us on the fan hotline.